Earth is home to an abundance and diversity of animals, people, and plants. One just has to open their eyes and minds to see and experience the beauty of it all. Julie Dawson is a prolific 86-year-old artist, author, and designer. She lives in Birmingham, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. With a love of art that began in childhood and a lifelong commitment to the Girl Scouts, Julie has embarked on a mission to inspire a new generation to overcome fear, spite, and anger. Her goal is to illuminate life and foster an appreciation for the many differences in cultures, religions, beliefs, customs, and traditions. Through her art and stories, Julie is portraying a world, both real and imagined, that offers solutions to ordeals and anguish and encourages acceptance and peace of mind. Her series of illustrated storybooks, the Sillybillies, are being used worldwide to help foster in children and adults positive behaviors and attitudes.
One of the fabulous things about being an artist and an author and a designer is I can go any direction I want. Sillybillies are a really deep part of my collection of activities because they have such meaning to me and also reflect my hopes for the world and my belief that people are terrific. We just are good, and we need to have that opportunity to have that good part of our lives really come out. That's what I hope the Sillybillies do. I know they do. Two extraordinary people brought me into this world. My parents were graduates of the University of Chicago, honor graduates. My mother was an art history major and had studied in Europe. So they introduced us to the idea of originality in whatever we did, to try things, to experiment, and let your brain go in different directions. And I won a prize when I was in 5th grade for my painting of Buster the dog. And so as a child, I know I tried everything. And I also was a part of a big family, and that was a very vital part of my life. Our teachers were professional teachers and really cared about their students, and they introduced us and expected us to really get involved in whatever they did. They were big influences. I would say other influences were through my Girl Scouting. As a child, 17, I was selected to represent the United States at an international Girl Scout conference in Switzerland, where there were 18 young women from 7 countries. And then in 1973, I was asked to be the leader of the same kind of conference in Mexico, where there were 25 young women from 10 countries. In both cases, our mission was to learn about one another's countries and cultures and go home to work for international understanding and world peace. A tall order for young people, but we've all taken it very seriously. So it really isn't a big surprise that Girl Scouting was a wonderful way for me to continue that mission. I received my bachelor's degree from DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, in English literature. It's really been central to thinking, organizing, and conducting my life. I worked for 15 years in administrative jobs, 2 years for my sorority and as a national field secretary, traveling around the country, worked in a bank and in personnel department. And then I moved to Detroit and I worked for 10 years for the Girl Scouts. Informally in many ways, but most importantly, 18 years at the Art Center here in Birmingham, learning watercolor primarily. When I first moved here and I did not know one single soul, somebody asked me if I'd like a blind date. And the blind date was this really extraordinary man. He was very bright. He was actually brilliant. Peter Dawson was an automotive engineer. He designed and built and raced cars. He did the engineering for the goldenrod, which broke the land speed record in 1965. It was open to everything. You wanted to learn about people, you wanted to learn about history, you wanted to learn about cultures. Travel was a natural for both of us. So we would go for a month to 7 weeks. We traveled to 101 countries and went back to many of them several times, and really, really shared wonderful conversations and observations, wanderings together. But my head is going, my eyes are going, my heart is going, and my camera is going. So I do a lot of my art based on what my photographs tell me. Also, I kept meticulous journals. And those journals turned out to have a special extra thing, well, two extra things. One, I give a lot of talks, so I gave about my travels, not travel talks, but what a country was like. And the second thing was when my husband was dying in the hospital, we spent 4 months there, all day, every day, in outpatient, and I read our journals. We got to relive our lives. What a deal. We had the best time in those 4 months. I decided to resign from the Girl Scouts and become a professional artist, author, designer, photographer, and speaker. That was 50 years ago. Through art and through travel, I have all this material from which to draw. All the people I've met, all the flowers, the animals, and so travel has really expanded everything that I want to do, and it's all in my head. So when I'm working here, I'm never really at home again. I'm off on some journey, and what a lovely way to live. I love people, and I love children. We chose not to have any of our own, therefore I can enjoy them all over the world. We love playing with them, and I think children are just such a rich part of our lives that they're a delight to paint. Animals, the textures of the teeth and the horns and the whiskers and the eyes, because the eyes tell who live there. Flowers are so exciting to paint because there's such a variety in their texture. Watercolor washes really pick that up. I believe very strongly that volunteerism is why we have such a strong country. I think there are different ways you can volunteer. The obvious one is easy to donate money, depending on how much you have. It's easy to give your time with whatever talents you happen to have, and it's easy to give the products of what you make. Of course, art is very obvious. I think it's important to think what your purpose is. For many people, it's just for their own pleasure. It's even more wonderful when somebody else can benefit by it. For me, it's the fun of sharing it with other people. So from the beginning, I was interested in selling and did. So I sold my original art, and it became quite a good-sized business. Then I made reproductions of them. That's a whole different kind of marketing. Then I thought, wow, I could make products with my art on them. So I have a whole line of products, from scarves to ties to bibs to t-shirts to pillowcases to whatever. And then I had a pop-up store in Birmingham, and somebody came in and said, I like your art. I think you should license it. And I said, I do too. What's licensing? So that sent me in a whole new direction of designing for homes and for wallpapers, for fabrics, for office, for clothing, for paper goods. And particularly during COVID, I was able to donate my prints, my reproductions, to staff members who are frontline workers and first responders in hospitals and in nonprofits, in retirement homes, in nursing homes. So they could be, that's obvious, the prints. But then my products sometimes are helpful as far as being used by organizations or to be sold to raise money for them. So I've been very involved in many, many organizations and nonprofits. So impressed with what happens in this country, that we see a need and we figure out a way to solve it. And then organizations get built. And over the years, I've gotten to know many, many organizations, and if I can do something to make their effort more effective, what a deal. So I guess it's just, I keep meeting organizations and I keep thinking, I could do this. And I do.
My name is Inge Pixie. I'm the head of individual giving and philanthropy at the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. The World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts is honored to work together with its alumni, Julie Dawson. Julie has been an incredible advocate for the transformational impact that girl guiding and girl scouting has on lives of young women. Julie has a deep belief that girl guiding and girl scouting is crucial to create brighter and stronger future for girls and young women. And we are honored to be able to work together for this mission. Julie's generosity and vision is a great example of female leadership for girl guiding and girl scouting to follow. WAGS as an organization is humbled to have her support and proud to work alongside her to change the future of girls and young women worldwide.
Somebody asked me if I would do a painting that could be used as a gift for children or birthday or whatever. So I did a painting of Sillybillies. Sillybillies are silly children wearing silly costumes, doing silly things. I discovered that I had a cousin who was diagnosed with brain cancer at 6 years of age, Becca. So I thought she needs something silly in her life, and I sent her a copy of my painting. And then 3 mornings I woke up and I'd written these stories about the Sillybillies. They're stories of encouragement. They're stories that I thought would be helpful to her. She was very freaked out by just that white surface in radiation and just blocking her mind. And I thought if she could think of something, she could picture something on that white surface, maybe that would help her. So my first book was encouraging her to imagine children, imagine whatever. And in my book, I told her about my Sillybillies, who are imaginary friends, and how they like to do that. They like to imagine things. And then the other books came along after that. And it's set up in the first book, the Sillybillies. Each has a merry bell to keep each full heart light. Each has a happy star to keep the dark nights bright. Each has a cheery ribbon with joy that never ends. They float and fly together to keep in touch with friends. So in each of the books, the Sillybillies all have a star, a bell, and a ribbon for the kids to find. The other thing that's fun in writing these books is to find a little way that the plot twists happily and comes in with another idea. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. This is the Sillybillies on the moon. And at one point, they're coming down to meet Becca. It's nice to have your very own and another one to spare. Then when someone needs a smile, there's an extra one to share. Introducing the joy of sharing smiles. In the Sillybillies Go to the Theater, the children are invited to make their own play. And in that play, they also have to make the scenery, they have to make the props, they have to make the costumes, and then they have to write the story, and each one has to do his or her own part. So for Becca, hello, my name is Becca Bell. I'm feeling not so well. I could yell, this mademoiselle is bald, but you can't tell. And in the end of that book, the readers are invited to make their very own play. The Sillybillies find a shadow. In this book, the children have to find a way to get rid of this clouds so the sun can shine, and therefore there will be shadows. So they go to find the sun, and the story tells about the more they danced, the more they sang, the more the sun did giggle, and soon the sun joined in the fun with a warble and a wiggle. At the end of this book, the children are invited to go outside and make your very own shadows and see what they look like. In the 6th book, the Sillybillies go on an imaginary hike in Africa. They're all wearing colorful bandanas, and they meet all these wondrous animals, particularly a giraffe and a zebra, who show them the joy of knowing children and people who are different from them. At the end of this book, there is that wonderful little twist, that surprise, where the bandanas are very important. Oh, look, they're done. They're taking a bow with happy hearts. And that is how we see a scene we can't believe. They have bandanas on each sleeve. They have to tell a story, and they have to show wonderment at discovering new ideas. They have to talk together about what it means. They get involved in how something might be hard to do. Maybe or how exciting it is to help somebody else be happy. And it's an encouragement of ways to live life that will be stand them in good stead all their lives. To be joyful, to be happy, to be helpful, to be thoughtful, to care, and to understand, to try and understand, and be open in pursuing thinking. I am so disturbed about all the hate in the world. I don't understand it. But I could moan and groan, and then I said, well, you could do something about it. So I invited my Sillybillies into the garden with me, and in 1 hour, we wrote the story, the poem. So this book is encouraging children to find the joy in knowing people who are different from them. In all of the books, the Sillybillies themselves are my watercolors. For this book, it's an inclusion of 3 different elements. On the computer, I take from a particular painting of a daffodils, and I go whoosh, whoosh. I take these little bits and pieces, and they make the water, they make the hills, they make the trees, they make the grass, one blade at a time. It's a very, very time-consuming process. Maybe each animal might take 4 hours. I won the International Book Award for the illustrations, which means that I can have a sticker on each book and also this incredible thing to wear around my neck. The important part about it is that I'm using the book with different groups so they can discover, they can examine their own ideas about how to be more open and how to appreciate different people. So the groups are as different as a preschool group, a group of people who in Pittsburgh who have mental disabilities, PAL, which is a police athletic league, and the Girl Scouts for their day camps. And I'm working now with the veterans and the Worldwide Girl Scouts and my national sorority. So I think all of us, kids and adults, both, can examine our ideas and hope to be more open. I actually donate the books to groups, and they conduct the sessions because they know their people, and therefore they can be more effective in changing my suggested questions to meet the level and interest and direction of their constituents. But these are the kinds of questions that I offer as suggestions. Have you ever been hated? How did that impact you? Have you ever hated? Do you know why? Have you ever seen pockets of hate? How did that affect you? Do you think attitudes can be changed? How? And my last question is, and what are you going to choose to do to change hate, to appreciate, to celebrate? In this process of inviting people to discuss an idea, I've made the whole concept of my book grow. With Becca, I was trying to help her, but then I realized other children had the same issues and problems, so I said to myself, darn, these are too good. Other children would like them. So those Sillybillies are just silly kids, but they're universal kids, and I think they're easily identifiable no matter what age group you are. So I think it's a natural thing for them, for children, to reach out and say, let's examine what we're thinking and doing, and how can we be better people? It sounds kind of stuffy, but I think Sillybillies keep them from being stuffy because they are silly looking. I am hoping that through my books, I am inviting children to use their ideas, use their minds, use their brains. That comes from my own background, where we were raised by very creative parents, and everything was, we made plays, we acted out stories, we wrote books, we did all these things, but they were all from us. So my hope is that children will gain a wonderful introduction and inspiration for their own creativity and using their imaginations.
I've been reading with my grandchildren Julie Dawson's books, and they are 5, 11, and 12. Of course, the 11 and 12-year-olds, they want to read it to us. So we do a family activity, and the 5-year-old absolutely adores these books. I find the message in these books so positive. Her book about finding a shadow is something that I would have done as a 3rd grade teacher with my class. We went outside and we found our shadows and we traced them with chalk. And this book would have been a perfect follow-up for that activity. I think her book with Stripes and Spots would be perfect to go into the classroom, read to the children, and have a deep discussion about how we have differences, but then how we're really a lot alike. I think the kids would go to the media center or maybe the classroom library and pull out these books and look at the beautiful artwork. They'll remember the stories, but they'll also be able to then explore the art in a more meaningful way. And I think the children would pull them again and again.
I have just completed all of the artwork for the Children's Hospital in Detroit for their emergency floor. When you first walk into the waiting room, the kids find my book on the wall. So while they're waiting to be treated, they and their parents, or whomever else, get to read the Sillybillies. And then they go into the environment. And in the emergency floor itself, they are first discover 22 of my paintings of animals or of my computer versions of animals in the hallways and in 16 exam rooms. There are 6 special exam rooms for children with behavioral issues. For those, we couldn't use paintings themselves, so I made vinyl borders that go around 3 walls. Each room has its very own theme, and then you go out into a hall and there's a mural 29 by 5 feet tall.
You know, when kids and their parents come into the emergency department, it's usually one of like the worst days they've ever had. And we quickly, put them in rooms in the emergency department. And before, we had Julie's artwork up everywhere and in every room. The walls were pretty plain and white, and maybe there was just a little bit of blue or green here or there. But having Julie's artwork in the room that these families can be in for hours and hours sometimes, I think really has made a difference in their stay in the emergency department. It gives them something that they can talk about, whether they talk about, the artwork or about the type of animal that's on the painting in their room. It just brings more light, I think, into their day and into their visit to the emergency department.
So there are other projects like that in the wind. And I love, whenever anybody has a bright idea, let's talk about it. And I'm having some really great discussions with various groups around the country right now of those, and around the world actually, helping girls and women develop skills and learn how to use their abilities and to become leaders, to change the world. That's something we as women can do really well. I have this great excitement over international gatherings where girls can get together and explore new ideas. There are 10 million girls in 152 countries in the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. So I'm working on conferences that are going to bring them together and how to take ideas and make them into action in whatever kind of country they live in and whatever kind of situation they live in, which is so different all over the world. Then each of the participants in these conferences will go home and train at least 100 other people in leadership skills, all of which will then be used to work for changing hate to appreciate, to celebrate, or to how to make us more harmonious and how to bring that joyful feeling of expanding our friendships. And this will happen in conjunction with my book. And so the Sillybillies Find Stripes and Spots, which is the same theme, will be given to each of the participants, and it will be part of what they can take home to their own countries. Even though they're in English, they can take them home and they can read them and explain them or whatever they want to do to make that come alive. Recently, I did a painting of the national flowers from depicting 152 countries from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. And that's been a very exciting combination because it also highlights my personal philosophy about life. And I wrote on it saying, seeing the beauty in our differences. I would love to have somebody else, some organization, some company, some whatever, partner with me and let me be the creator and let them take it on to make it a big world. Join the big world, but change the big world too to something that has more value, that has more substance than just a silly creature. I shouldn't use the word, than just, a trendy creature, or a trendy idea. Because my Sillybillies have substance. And so to have some other body, whether it's a person or a company, take on that responsibility, that excitement about moving it forward. So it is sort of a brand on its own, so to speak, but a brand with meaning.
At the request of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, Julie has created an 8th book with the theme Leadership. In Sillybillies Find Confidence, 6 girls from around the world come together to quickly develop the skills they need to restore a sad-looking tree intended for a pageant show. The story shows how the girls overcome fear of failure and learn how to take charge of a formidable task together. Despite differences in their backgrounds and lack of experience.